Good morning, students. Our today's topic in the topic of production in the subject of business studies O levels is the factors affecting the location of a business. So there are different kinds of the businesses. So first business which we are going to read is manufacturing business. So the original topic is factors affecting the location, and now we are going to read regarding with manufacturing business. So the first point which will affect the location of the manufacturing business is production methods. The type of the production methods used in manufacturing business is going to have a significant influence on the location of that business. If job production is used, job production is a production method in which the product is made according to the specification of the customers. So if job production is used, the business is likely to be on a small scale, and so nearness to the customers will be of more important. But if production will be on the large scale, the location of the components, suppliers might be of the greater importance because a large number of the components will need to be transported and the cost will be high. So the most of the businesses then try to locate themselves near to the component suppliers so that the cost may be lower. The next point that will affect the location of the business is market. Locating a factory near to the market for its products used to be thought important when the product gained weight. For example, that is weight gaining or bulk increasing products. That is, example is here, when it became heavier and therefore more expensive to transport than the raw material components. And here is an example. Example might be drinks manufacturer, where the bottles and ingredients are lighter than the filled bottles, and so the factory may have to be located near to the main markets for the product so that the transport cost may be lower. The next point that affect the location of the manufacturing business is if the product perishes quickly and needs to be fresh when delivered to the market, such as milk, bread, and cakes. The factory might be located close to its retail outlets. However, ways of preserving foods for longer have reduced the importance of this factor, but to some extent, this factor affects even now. The next point that affect the location of the manufacturing business is raw materials and components. Raw materials may be considerably heavier or more expensive to transport than the finished products. Where a mineral is processed from the ore, there will usually be considerable waste produced in this process. It is often cheaper to process the ore near to the mining site than to transport it elsewhere. So the transport cost may be reduced in this way. Second point, if a particular process uses many different components, a business might look very carefully at its location. If many of these component suppliers are located near to one another, it might be preferably to locate near to these suppliers because you can get all of the components for different suppliers from one place because all these suppliers are located near to one another. This was often a factor in car manufacturing. The next point that affects the location of the manufacturing business is if the raw material needs to be processed quickly while still fresh, locating near to the raw material source is still important. An example is frozen vegetables or tinned fruits which need to be processed quickly. There will also be a lot of the waste generated which does not go into the packaging. The next point that affect the location of the manufacturing business is external economies of the scale. In addition to the component suppliers, firms who can support the business in other way might need to be located nearby. Sport businesses which install and maintain equipment may be better if nearby so that they can respond quickly to the breakdown. The local education establishments such as the universities might have research departments who work with the business on the developing new products. Being in close contact may help the business to be more effective. So you have to locate near to your sport businesses. The next thing that affect the location of the manufacturing business is the availability of the labor. If particular skilled labor is needed, it may be easier and cheaper to recruit these employees if the business set up in an area where people with the relevant skills available live. If the manufacturing process requires a large number of the unskilled workers, an area where there is high unemployment may be more suitable because labor will be more in that area and will be available at lower price because unemployment rate is higher there. Also, the wage rates paid to the employees might vary, and an area where wages are lower might be preferable. For example, in any country, some cities are more developed and some are less developed. So definitely the workers will be available at lower rate in the less developed areas. Next thing that affect the location of the manufacturing business is the government influence. When a government wants to encourage businesses to locate in a particular area, it will offer state-funded grants to encourage firms to move there. This can be a favorable influence. Not only the government offer the grants, but also the infrastructure in that area is better as compared to the other because government wants to develop that area as an industrial hub. So if government influence, so that will be better to locate there. If an area has high unemployment, the government might give money to businesses who locate in that area so that the peoples get more jobs. However, the government influence might be negative in that there might be regulations or restrictions on what businesses can do. An example might be where the business produces a harmful waste product during the manufacturing process and the government will not want the waste product to poison the surrounding area, for example, nuclear waste. The next thing that affect the location of the manufacturing business is transport and communication. Businesses usually need to be near to a transport system, be it road, rail, inland waterways, port, or airport. Where the product is for export, then the ability to easily get to port will be important. Indeed, some businesses establish themselves in the surrounding buildings of the port for ease of the access to the ships. A nearby motorway can reduce costs by speeding up the time spent delivering the products to market even when the market is quite a distance away. The next thing that affect the location of the manufacturing business is the power. To some industries, having a reliable source of the power, that is, no regular power cuts, may be essential. So that area will be more suitable for locating the manufacturing business. The next factor that affect the manufacturing business is water supply. If large supplies of the water are needed as part of the manufacturing process, for example, for cooling purposes with a power station, then being near to the water supply such as the sea or a river will be important. Also, the cost of the water supply might be important in some areas where it is expensive. So definitely in that area in which water supply is like less costly, will be more suited for the location of the manufacturing business. The next factor that affect the location of the manufacturing business is personal preference of the owners. Since it will be the owners of the business who usually decide whether to locate the business, their personal preferences will often influence their decision. They may originate from a particular area and wish to stay in the area due to family links, or they may want to live in an area that is particularly pleasant for some reasons. For example, good climate or a lot of nearby entertainments. The next point that affect the location of the manufacturing business is the climate. This will not influence most manufacturing businesses, but occasionally climate might be important. Silicon Valley is an example. In the USA has very dry climate which aids the production of the silicon chips. Also, warmer climates reduces the heating cost that would be incurred in colder climates for some businesses. This will be an important consideration when deciding where to locate within the country. Our next topic in the lecture is factors affecting the location of our retailing business. So concentrate yourself. We are going to start now. The first point that will affect the location of our retailing business is shoppers. This is the most important factor. Most retailers will want an area which is popular, such as shopping malls, centers. The type of the shopper and area attracts will also influence the attractiveness of the area to particular types of the retailers. If the retailer sells expensive goods, it needs to be an area where the people on high incomes might visit, or if the goods are small gift type products, the retailer might want to be in an area visited by the tourist. The next point which affect the location of the retailing business is nearby shops. Being able to locate near the shops, businesses which are visited regularly, such as the post office or the popular fast food outlet, will mean that a lot of the people pass your shops on the way to other shops and the businesses. They may look in your window as they pass and may go in and make a purchase. So this is the advantage to be located near a lot of these shops. There may be many competitors nearby. You may think that this is bad for business, but it can also be positive situation because a lot of the customers will visit that area. So they will look into your window and may come in and may make a purchase. If the business sells clothes, then being located near the many other cloth shops encourages people to visit the area as there is a lot of the choice, therefore increasing business. If the clothes shop is in a position where there are no other similar shops nearby, it may not attract people to visit the shop as there will be limited choice. The next point that affect the location of the retailing business is customer parking availability nearby. Okay, where many of the customers use their cars, the ability to park their vehicle will be very important as to whether they visit particular shops. Where parking is convenient and near to the shops, this will encourage shoppers to that area and therefore possibly increase your sales. Lack of the parking may put people off visiting the area and sales will be lower. The next point that affect the location of our retailing business is the availability of the suitable vacant premises. If a suitable vacant shop or premises are not available for purchase or rent, the business may not be able to locate in the area it wishes. The next thing that affect the location of a retailing business is rent and rates. The more central the site of the premises, the higher the rent and the taxes will usually be. If a retail area is popular, then there will be a high demand for the sites in this area, and therefore the cost of the renting these sites will be higher. For example, in a shopping mall, in a popular shopping mall, the rents and rates will be higher. If the area is less popular, that is on the edge of the town, the demand and therefore the rents will be lower. If the government also imposes tax on the premises, the more popular sites will attract higher taxes. The next point that affect the location of a retailing business is access for delivery vehicles. Access for delivery vehicles might be a consideration if it is very difficult for them to gain access to the premises. The next thing that affect the location of a retailing business is security. The rate of the crime in an area might be of importance to a business. High rates of the crime such as the theft and vandalism may deter a business from locating in a particular area. Insurance companies might not want to insure the business if it is in an area of high crime. A shopping area which is patrolled by guards, even though it will be more expensive to rent the premises, might prove preferable. So these were the points which will affect the location of our retailing business. The next topic which we are going to read in the location of our business is factors affecting to relocate either at home or abroad. So the first point which will affect in this case is the present site is not large enough for planned expansion. When a business sees a steady increase in its sales, it may invest in its present site and production more products. But there will be a limit to how much it can expand within its present location. There will come a point when if it cannot buy or rent adjacent premises, it will probably move to a bigger site. So this is the first point which will affect to relocate either at home or abroad. The next point which will affect is raw material source runs out. So if the raw material source run out, a business must either bring in alternative supplies from elsewhere or move to a new site where it can more easily obtain these supplies. This is particularly true of mineral sources such as oil wells. The next factor that affects to relocate the business is difficulties with the labor force. If the business is located in a country where wages keep on rising, there might come a point when the business decides to relocate overseas to take advantage of the lower wage cost. This has been true of many Western businesses moving their manufacturing plants to poorer countries where the wages paid are much lower. If particular types of the skilled labor are needed by the business, it might need to relocate to a different area where it can recruit the right type of the labor to enable the business to expand. The next point that affect the relocation of the business is the rents and taxes rising. If other costs such as the rents or taxes keep rising, this might also cause the business to consider relocating to keep its cost down. The next factor that affects the location of a business in relocation is new markets open up overseas. If new markets open up in different countries, it may be more cost effective to locate a manufacturing plant there than to transport the goods overseas. The next factor that will affect in relocating is the government grants. Governments may want to encourage foreign businesses to locate in their country to bring in investment and jobs to the country. This is an important factor in the location of a business. The last factor that will affect in relocating the business is the tariff barriers. If there are tariff barriers such as quotas, where a limit is placed on the quantity of the imports of a particular good, then by locating in that country, there will be no restrictions. An example of this is the investment by Japanese car companies in Europe in order to get around the European Union's strict quotas for the import of the cars. So these were the factors which affect relocating of the business. The next topic which we are going to read in the lecture is the factors affecting the location of a service industry or service sector business. So the first factor which will affect the location of a service sector business is the customers, because the service sector business definitely needs customers to be nearby. So locating a service sector business near its customers will be very important for certain types of the services. These are usually services where direct contact between the business and the customer is required. If a quick response time is needed to serve the customers, then the business needs to be located nearby. This would be true for plumbers and electricians who serve the local area in which they live. Other examples of the personal services that need to be convenient for customers to use are hairdressers, beauticians, caterers, restaurants, cafes, gardeners, builders, post offices. Some services do not need to be near to the customers. Direct personal contact is not necessary, as these services can be contacted by telephones, post, or the internet. These businesses can therefore be located in different parts of the country or in different countries to where their customers live. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is personal preference of the owners. The owners can influence where particular services choose to locate. They often locate the business near to where they live. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is technology. Technology has allowed some services to locate away from their customers. Some services are now conducted by telephone or via the internet, and therefore the business itself does not need to be near to customers. These service businesses can locate anywhere and can therefore choose to locate on the outskirts of the cities or even in the remote areas, depending on how many employees are required, so that they can take the advantage of cheaper rents and rates. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is the availability of the labor. If the service business requires a large number of the employees, then it cannot locate in remote areas. It will need to locate near a large town or city where more labor is available. If a particular type of the skilled labor is required, then it may also have to locate near to where this labor is found. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is climate. Climate will affect some businesses, particularly if they are linked to tourism in some way. Hotels often need to locate themselves where the climate is good in order to serve the needs of their customers. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is near to other businesses. Some services serve the needs of large businesses, such as firms that service equipment found in big companies. They will need to be nearby to respond quickly to a call to repair equipment. Services such as banks and post offices need to be near busy areas for the convenience of the customers, and this often means being near to retail shops that people visit regularly. The next factor that affects the location of a service business is the rent and rates. If the service does not need to be on the main streets in a town or city center, then they will locate on the outskirts of the business to benefit from lower rents and taxes. For example, doctors, dentists, lawyers, etc. So this was the lecture, students. I am hopeful that this will be much more interesting and easy for you to understand. So read this lecture again, understand it, learn it, and make your notes. Thank you so much.